Have you guys ever watched one of those top 10 most forgettable Pokemon, or have you ever just randomly encountered a Pokemon that you completely forgot existed? Well, Lumineon is a Pokemon that fits both of those categories. I honestly thought that Lumineon and its pre-evolution Finneon were Generation 5 Pokemon until I started making this video and realized they were introduced in Generation 4. And with that being said, Lumineon being so forgettable can attribute to the fact that it might just be one of the worst Pokemon ever. If you guys are unfamiliar with this series, we take a look at some of the worst Pokemon in the game and discuss if they are completely useless or if they have some sort of use. Each Pokemon will be rated on a scale 1 to 5 based on their offense, defense, versatility, move pool, and overall viability. If a Pokemon doesn't excel in any of these categories, then it is deemed to be one of the worst Pokemon. If one of the Pokemon discussed in this series happens to be one of your favorite Pokemon, I'm sorry, but just because a Pokemon is your favorite doesn't mean it's safe from being in one of these videos. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure you subscribe and leave a like, and let me know in the comments down below what Pokemon you want to see featured on this series in the future, and don't forget to check out the playlist in the description as well to see all of the Pokemon featured thus far. So to give an overview on Lumineon, Lumineon was introduced in Generation 4, and it seemed like it's supposed to be one of the stereotypical fish of this generation, kind of like Goldeen or Whalmer in the past, where they are pretty common. However, Finneon and Lumineon aren't all that common in Diamond and Pearl, which were the games they were introduced in. Lumineon is a mono water-type Pokemon, which is one of the most common typings in the game, and it also gets some decent abilities in Storm Drain, Swift Swim, and Water Veil. Storm Drain is arguably the best of the three because you can use it from a defensive standpoint. However, all three of these abilities have some sort of uses at least, especially in a draft league. Lumineon has a stat line of 69 in HP, 69 in attack, 76 in defense, 69 in special attack, 86 in special defense, and 91 in speed. Which isn't that horrible. It also has access to some nice utility moves like Defog, U-Turn, and Scald. Even Soak could possibly be usable, I have no idea. I've honestly considered drafting Lumineon in draft leagues before because of this, since unlike previous Pokemon featured in this series, Lumineon is a relatively unique Pokemon. There really isn't one Pokemon that just straight up outclasses Lumineon and does everything it does better, because Lumineon's kind of like a jack of all trades, but a master at none. More of a mediocre jack of all trades, but certainly not a master at anything. So moving on to the positives. There really aren't that many, but Lumineon does have access to Scald, U-Turn, and Defog. Like I said earlier, all very, very good utility moves. Make this Pokemon pretty nice. 91 speed as well is decent. You do speed tie things like Landorus Therian, which is kind of funny, and you are a relatively fast Pokemon if you run this thing defensively. I mention this a lot, but I always like it when a defensive Pokemon like Cresselia has a high speed stat because I feel like being able to outspeed other walls is just pretty nice. It also has some slightly better than okay bulk. I'm kind of reaching here because the bulk really isn't that much, but it's better than some other Pokemon we've seen in the series. Storm Drain is also a very, very good ability, and Swift Swim could be usable. In the rain, you'll outspeed a lot of things. You're on a modest or adamant nature, which is kind of cool. And this thing can also be ran defensively or as a mix attacker since it does have the same attack and special attack stat at 69, which isn't that great, but it is something to work with. And the last positive is it is a relatively unique Pokemon. Like I said earlier, there really isn't one Pokemon that just does everything Lumineon does. Sure, there are plenty of bulky water types, but there's not many that also get Defog and U-Turn. There's a lot of things that, not really a lot of things, there's a couple of things Lumineon has going for it. And now on to the negatives. Although it can be ran mixed, it does still have some pretty poor defenses. Yeah, being in the rain is kind of nice, but being that reliant on it isn't really that great, because other than that, you're not going to do much damage. You are definitely better off running this thing defensive. It also has a pretty shallow move pool, although it has some unique... It also has a pretty shallow move pool, although it does have some cool options. There really aren't that many moves in total, like it's really a shallow move pool. Another negative, like I've mentioned multiple times, there really isn't anything Lumineon does well. There's a lot of small things it can do kind of okay, but there's just not one thing that this thing does well. Another negative is if you want an offensive water type, there are definitely better options than Lumineon, and if you want a defensive water type, there are definitely better options than Lumineon. The hardest part about replacing Lumineon is you really can't get a good defensive water type that is also a hazard remover in this lower tier with a decent speed stat and access to U-Turn. I guess the closest thing I can think of is Prinplup, but at the same time, Prinplup is an NFE. You have to have an Eviolite. Yeah, it gets Defog, but it doesn't get U-Turn. There are definitely some differences between the two Pokemon. And the last negative, which I mentioned earlier as well, it's a jack of all trades, but a very mediocre jack of all trades. Now this is also a new little section I want to incorporate in this series, and something I mentioned a bit earlier, but I want to talk about this Pokemon in Draft Leagues. I honestly think this Pokemon could be okay. Now I don't want to go too far in depth because like I said, I've never used this Pokemon in a league before. However, it can be a pretty decent cheap Pokemon to pick up in a very late round. Let's say you only have one water type in something like Seismitoad, you might want to pick up Lumineon because although they're both water types, they don't really contradict each other too much. Yeah, they're both weak to grass, but they do both do some very different things. Seismitoad being a stealth rocker, Lumineon being a more defensive defogger, which is kind of nice. So it's something to keep in mind. If you guys are looking for a fun budget pick, I definitely recommend trying out Lumineon because it's something I really want to try. I know a lot of people tend to pick like a joke pick for the very last pick. I want to see somebody pick Lumineon and I want to see them use it. It's honestly a Pokemon that I really want to draft because I feel like it could be usable. So on to the ratings. For offense, I'm going to give this thing a 1 out of 5. This thing only has 69 in both attack stats, and it can't really get anything higher than a 1 out of 5. I was tempted to give it a 2 out of 5 because of the 91 speed, which is pretty nice, and Swift Swim as well, which does help it offensively, but it's still not hitting very hard, and it's not the best Swift Swim option. There's definitely much better Swift Swim options, even in the lower tiers. For defense, I will give it a 2 out of 5. 69 HP really isn't that bad. I'm just now realizing this Pokemon has 3 stats that are 69, which is kind of weird. And 76 defense and 86 Spadef is definitely manageable. It's also a water type, which is decent, but it does lack reliable recovery, and it does have a relatively low defensive stat at 76, which is why I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. Not the worst defenses, definitely usable, but you're not going to be relying on this thing to have lit pick hits. For versatility, I'm going to give this thing a 3 out of 5. Surprisingly, this Pokemon is relatively versatile. Like I mentioned earlier, it can be used physical or special due to the fact that it has the same attack and special attack. It can be used defensively with things like Defog and Storm Drain, and it can be somewhat offensive with Swift Swim and a modest or adamant nature to go along with its 91 speed. There are some options here, which is why Lumineon gets a pretty respectable 3 out of 5 in versatility. For Movepool, I'm going to give Lumineon a 1. Although Lumineon has some nice options for moves, the Movepool is still super shallow. Its best coverage options are limited to just Ice Beam and Signal Beam, which really aren't the best, and defensively you're pretty much forced to run Scald, U-Turn, Defog, and a 4th move like Ice Beam or Ice Beam to go along with it. Maybe Tailwind if you want to go that route, that could be a fun little cheeky set, but there really isn't that many great options. There are some interesting options here, but again, the biggest issue with Lumineon is that there's quite a few things this Pokemon can do, but there's not one thing this thing does particularly well. And for viability, I'm going to give this thing a 2 out of 5 because I do believe this thing does have some uses. It is somewhat outclassed defensively by things like Water Absorb Politoed and Empoleon and even Wartortle in lower tiers, but those Pokemon all don't get U-Turn and Defog, which is a nice little niche that Lumineon has. Even for lower tiers, there are a few better offensive water type options like Masculine, but I wouldn't even consider Lumineon to be the worst water type in this tier. Maybe I'm a little bit biased because I want to use this Pokemon, but I honestly don't think Lumineon is that bad. And that's it for Lumineon. Is it the worst Pokemon? I honestly don't think so. It's probably the best Pokemon we covered so far, even considering Articuno, which is a legendary Pokemon. Again, might be a little bit biased because I want to use this thing, but I do think this thing has some potential. I did get a few comments suggesting I talk about this Pokemon in this series, and I figured, let's do it because I like this Pokemon. If you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure you subscribe and leave a like. Leave a comment down below letting me know what you guys think of Lumineon as well as what Pokemon I want to see featured on this series in the future. Have a good rest of your day. I will see you guys next time, and bye-bye.